Welcome back. In this lab, we will register a domain name through Route 53 and use it to direct traffic based on latency to our Ec2 instances. Our Ec2 instances will have an HTML page with an h1 tag that will display their location so we can differentiate which Ec2 instance we are visiting. Now, this lab is optional because it will cost you $12 to register our domain name, and it will cost some money to create our hosted zone. But I want you to at least follow along so you can see how Route 53 works. Let's get started. In our Ec2 console page, we will first launch our two Ec2 instances. The first Ec2 instance I will launch will be in the North Virginia region, so I will click on Launch Instances. I will select my Amazon Linux 2 AMI. I will also select the T2 micro instance and then click on Next. Under User Data, I will paste in the code that will create our h1 tag along with the web server. And as always, you can find the code for this lab in the course resources section of this course. I will go to our security group tab and I will select our EC2 lab security group and then click on review and launch and then click on launch. I will acknowledge that I have my key pair and click on launch instance. I will click on View Instances and then go down and copy the public IP address of our web server and paste it in a new tab. It doesn't matter if it hasn't loaded, I just want to keep it open in a tab so that we have somewhere to reference the web server. I will now change my region to EU West 3, and this is the Paris region. And as you can see, we don't currently have any Ec2 instances deployed here. We can go ahead and click on Launch Instances. We can use the same settings as our last Ec2 instance, so I will select the Amazon Linux 2 AMI. And I will click on the T2 micro instance type. Under User Data, I will paste in the user data script for my EU West 3 web server. I will then go to the Security Group tab, and as you can see, we currently don't have a security group we can select from in this region. So I will go ahead and create one. I will simply add in our HTTP and our HTTPS rule. Then I will click on Review and Launch. And then we can click on Launch. I will also have to create a new key pair for this region, so I will name my key pair Route 53 Lab. And then we can click on Download Key Pair. We won't be using SSH to connect to our EC2 instance, so we won't really need it. We can now click on Launch Instances. I will click on View Instances and then copy the IP address of our web server and paste it in a new tab. Now that we have deployed our web servers, let's go ahead and test them both out. I will first check and see if my first web server is now deployed. So I will click on the second tab and then click on Refresh. Everything looks good, so I will click on my third tab and do the same. Everything looks good on both web servers. Now that our web servers have been deployed, it's time to register our domain name. So we can go ahead and click on Services, scroll down till we see Networking and Content Delivery and then click on it, and then click on Route 53. While we are here, I want you to note that Route 53 is a global service. And the very thing we need to do here is create a domain name. So I will click on Register Domain. I will then search for the domain name that I want. So I will type in ZTM-cloud. and it looks like ztm-cloud.com is available, so I will click on Add to Cart. And as you can see, it will cost me $12 to register this domain name for the year. And there are monthly fees associated with the DNS management, meaning if we created a hosted zone for the domain, it will cost us about 50 cents per hosted zone per month. I'm okay with the cost, so I will click on Continue. And here, we will have to enter in our personal or company information. So I will go ahead and enter all of these details, and after that, we will continue with the video. Awesome. Our order was submitted to AWS, so now we just have to wait about 5 to 10 minutes for our registration to go through. So if we click on Close and then click on Go to Domains, I should now see my domain name in the Pending Request tab. I will wait a couple of minutes while that goes through and continue with the video. Now that everything has gone through, we should now be able to see our domain name in the Registered Domains tab. As you can see, our domain name was successfully registered. We can now go to our Hosted Zones tab, and we should now see a hosted zone that was created for our domain name. So let's click on the hosted zone name. And here, we will create a new route for our domain name. So let's click on the Create Record Set button. Under Create Record Set, I will define my name to be www.ztm-cloud.com. I will leave my type as a record because it will be based on an IP address. For the value, I will copy the IP address of our first web server, which is the web server that is located in the North Virginia region, and I will paste it in this box. We only want the IP address, so we can remove anything else that is not the IP address itself. For the routing policy, I will choose a latency-based policy, but as you can see, we can create the other types of routing policies like simple or weighted. The reason we are choosing latency-based routing is because I want to make sure that we are directed to the server that takes the shortest amount of time to reach. For our region, I will select the US East 1, which is where our first server is hosted. For the set ID, I will give it a description of North Virginia server. And we can go ahead and click on Create. Now that our first record is created, we can go ahead and do the same for our second server. So let's click on the Create Record Set button again, and under Create Record Set, I will define my name to be www.ztm-cloud.com. For the value, I will copy the IP address of our second web server, which is the server that is located in the Paris region, and I will paste it in this box. We can again choose a latency-based policy. For our region, I will select the EU West 3, which is where our second server is hosted. And for the set ID, I will give it a description of Paris server. And then we can go ahead and click on Create. Now we should have two records, one for our North Virginia server and one for our Paris server. Now, what do you think we should do next? That's right, the most important part. We should test and see if it's working. So I will type in www.ztm-cloud.com in my web browser and see what happens. It looks like it took me to the North Virginia server. The reason it took me there is because I'm located in North Carolina, which is a state located right under Virginia, and because we configured a latency-based routing policy. If we refresh our web page a couple of times, I should only see the North Virginia web server. But if I use my VPN to change my IP address to be a Paris IP address, and then click on Open a New Private Browser tab, I should now be able to see the Paris web server. But what happens if we change our location to another country, like Germany? What do you think will happen? Let's find out. I will open up my VPN and change my IP address to be in Germany. I will then open a new private web browser tab and type in www.ztm-cloud.com again. As you can see, it takes us to the Paris web server because that is a lot closer than the North Virginia server. Now, I want to quickly recap what we just did. We created two EC2 instances with a web server, one located in North Virginia and the other in Paris. We created and registered our domain name with Route 53, and then we used the hosted zone to create latency-based routing policies that would direct us to the closest web server. I hope you feel more comfortable with Route 53. I'll see you in the next video.